So, as digital capital, it can negate or retire the national debt, or it can convert us from owing 40 trillion to owning 40 trillion of net assets. So it's a very powerful financial lever. And the companies in the United States, like my company, they're capitalizing on Bitcoin. They're going to be worth 20 to 40 trillion dollars just on their Bitcoin assets if they continue to capitalize.
In this recent interview on CoinDesk Spotlight with Michael Saylor, we learn about Bitcoin's explosive potential as digital capital, why Trump's strategic Bitcoin reserve could change everything, and how Bitcoin's unstoppable decentralization positions it as the world's next financial superpower. Saylor boldly claims Bitcoin will redefine global economics, turning national debts into assets overnight. He reveals exclusive insights about Trump's historic Bitcoin strategy, why decentralization gives Bitcoin an untouchable advantage, and explains how Bitcoin's rise is inevitable, regardless of political dynamics. Before we begin this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel. Now let's hear more from Michael Saylor.
I think the last 2 weeks have been extraordinary for Bitcoin and for the strategic Bitcoin reserve because momentum is really building. 2 weeks ago, there were three priorities, or there were three things talked about in the digital assets universe. A stablecoin act, right? The Genius bill, and a bill to create stable coins and issue them in the U.S. And that really addresses the digital currency asset class. And then there's discussion of a market structure bill, and that's to create an entire digital assets framework, presumably to issue something akin to digital tokens or tokenized securities, digital securities. And then there is the strategic Bitcoin bill, or the Bitcoin Act. That was the third priority. And it was a question mark of where that was in DC. There was support, but people were wondering. What happened in the past 2 weeks is the strategic Bitcoin reserve got elevated to a primary, if not the primary priority, with the executive order. So the president created it. And I think there are some very important things that happened. On Thursday night, about a week ago, the president issued the executive order creating the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And in the executive order designated just Bitcoin to go in the reserve, said we should never ever sell it, don't sell the Bitcoin, and then directed the Secretary of Commerce and Treasury to look for budget neutral ways to acquire more Bitcoin. That was the strongest endorsement of any asset, I don't know, in 100 years, I think, by a president of the United States. You could imagine if the president has said, I'm directing the government to acquire silver and never sell it, and I want to buy more silver, or pick any asset, it would have been an extraordinary announcement. I think that was followed up by the Digital Assets Summit. And in the Digital Assets Summit, the president reiterated those points, and the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce and Small Business Administration all were present and reiterated their support. That actually was quite amazing, along with all of the industry leaders being in one place at one time, and of uniform mind. I think Friday night after that summit, I think the most important thing said in this industry in 4 years was said Friday night, and I think it missed a lot of people's attention. I don't think people really realized what happened. David Sachs, the crypto czar, went on the All In podcast, and on the All In podcast, he said unequivocally that the U.S. government only recognizes one crypto asset as being decentralized. So what Sachs said was Bitcoin is a decentralized asset, a store of value. That's why it's in the strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's the only one. And so what you had was a member of cabinet responsible for digital assets policy in essence, providing very clear guidance that Bitcoin is a digital commodity, an asset without an issuer. And that's the policy of the United States and the president of the United States. And I think for 4 years, Gary Gensler at the SEC implied that, in 100 different ways, implied that Bitcoin is a commodity and nothing else is. But he implied it in a fairly obscure fashion that was kind of not very constructive, because he implied it by suing everybody else. What you had here was a different administration articulating it, but in a constructive fashion, because what Sachs said is Bitcoin is the asset without the issuer. If there are other crypto assets in the future that prove to be decentralized, we will consider them when the time comes. So we're not dismissing the possibility there would be another commodity, but right now we recognize one, and our agenda is to provide a legitimate framework to issue digital currencies, digital tokens, and digital securities. And of course, the president directed that should come to his desk by August. He said, I want to see it by August. He's actually said in the first executive order, he said within 6 months, so by late July. But
as we just heard Michael Saylor discuss Bitcoin's explosive potential as digital capital, now let's hear him elaborate on why Trump's Bitcoin reserve is a groundbreaking national security move and how Bitcoin's unique decentralization sets it apart from every crypto challenger. Saylor confidently argues that Bitcoin is the only asset truly decentralized, a fact now officially recognized by Trump's administration, giving it unprecedented political and economic power. He describes the strategic Bitcoin reserve as a turning point, permanently embedding Bitcoin into America's financial future. Saylor dismisses competitors as irrelevant, reinforcing that Bitcoin's dominance is already sealed. Now, let's listen to what Michael Saylor has to say.
Well, that's been the debate for a decade, right? And it's been a massive debate and a massive source of confusion, which is, are there other digital commodities? And the position of the previous administration, Christine, was you're either a commodity, in which case you can trade on a crypto exchange legitimately, or you're a security, in which case it's illegal. We're going to sue you, shut you down, or jail you. You see, so we had a false dichotomy, and in that world where you're either going to die, the best case is economic death, and you're blocked from the banking system. By the way, everybody's blocked from the banking system. I think there's only one universally acknowledged digital commodity in the world.
Okay.
Right? There's only one. There's Bitcoin. I've said that, right? There is no second best. I've implied that and said that, and I've spent $33 billion based on that. So yeah, it was my view 4.5 years ago. There's one digital commodity. But Christine, there's a more important point here. Even if there was a second, third, and fourth, like let's take the fork wars, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. Even if you fork Bitcoin and you maintain that's a commodity, they're all going to zero if the use case is store of value or cap or money, right? Because if you were to fork Bitcoin and claim it's decentralized, the free market is going to pick the strongest network, and it's going to be monetized, and everything else is going to zero. So it doesn't matter from a practical point of view. My position is not that you couldn't theoretically create another digital commodity. For example, if China forked Bitcoin and declared China coin, and then said it's legal to mine China coin and it's tax-free to hold China coin, and you can bank China coin in China, in theory, the power of a nation state could create digital property in China. Just like for example, I acknowledge that real estate in China is an asset without an issuer. I just don't want to own it, right? Like an American doesn't want to own Chinese real estate. An American wouldn't want to own China coin. But in theory, if you understand the economic theory of a crypto commodity, you could create it. It's just very unlikely. at this point, you can never create a global money that's a crypto commodity because Bitcoin has $1 trillion of smart money behind it. And the next best thing doesn't have even 1%. I mean, less than 1% of that. In my speech at the National Press Club on Tuesday, I covered this in a 30-minute presentation for the Bitcoin Policy Institute, and I would encourage anyone to go grab that. It's on my X profile. I posted it. The point that I make is that there are 4 different metaphors, 4 different ways to understand the Bitcoin network. You can understand Bitcoin as digital capital. It is the asset without the issuer. If it's digital capital, then it's going to grow to a $200 trillion plus network over time. And the value to the United States is anywhere from $3 trillion to $100 trillion if the US begins to acquire that network. So, as digital capital, it can negate or retire the national debt, or it can convert us from owing 40 trillion to owning 40 trillion of net assets. So it's a very powerful financial lever. And the companies in the United States, like my company, they're capitalizing on Bitcoin. They're going to be worth 20 to 40 trillion dollars just on their Bitcoin assets if they continue to capitalize. So understood as digital capital, Bitcoin is enriching the corporations and the government itself, depending upon how much Bitcoin those entities own. That's the first metaphor. The second metaphor is Bitcoin is digital property. If you think of it as gold or cheese, nobody rents their cheese or mortgages their cheese. But when you think of it as owning 100 acres in Manhattan, if your family owned 100 acres of Manhattan 100 years ago and you owned it this year, and I asked you, what's your family doing with it? How are you going to pay your bills? You wouldn't say, well, we're going to sell our property in Manhattan. You would say, we're going to rent it. We're going to develop a building on it.
To watch the full interview, check out the link in the description. In this interview, Michael Saylor delivered bold predictions on Bitcoin's role as digital capital, Trump's revolutionary Bitcoin strategy, and why decentralization guarantees Bitcoin's dominance. But here's what we want to know from you. How could Trump's Bitcoin reserve strategy reshape global politics and financial security? And will Bitcoin's unmatched decentralization finally silence all other crypto competitors? Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe, like, and share our video for more engaging content exploring the innovative world of decentralized technologies. SIM swap fraud is sweeping the globe, and your mobile security is at risk. Switch to Efani and lock out SIM swap fraud and get the most elite mobile protection in the world. Efani guarantees 100% protection from SIM swaps backed by a $5 million insurance policy. Stay secure with reliable coverage, free international roaming, and unlimited data. Trust Efani to keep your communications and assets secure. Get military-grade protection, 24/7 concierge service, and a hassle-free upgrade. Click the link below for $150 off. Thanks for watching. Help support this channel and receive exclusive offers from one of our partners located in the description. We'll see you on the next one.